My name is Ian Wilkinson. I'm a student here at the University of Iowa. Initially, when I came to the university, I was a student of psychology, but the way that psychology approached thinking about the mind wasn't quite what I had in mind for myself. And so over time, I gravitated more toward philosophy and a sort of theoretical approach to some of these matters. One of the key thinkers and influencing me has been Maurice Merleau-Ponty. And so when I was still trying to figure out a lot of different, very fundamental issues about how I think about things, I came to his writing. And one of the things with him that really struck me was how much he tried to ground our basic understanding in the body itself. And for some reason that made a lot of sense to me. And since then I've been building up that way. But again, in that respect, I wasn't quite at home in the department, and so I ended up over in cinema, which might seem like kind of an odd movement. But for me, part of what it marked was getting back in a way to something that Merleau-Ponty said in an essay of his called I and Mind. He remarked at the very beginning something to the effects of, science has ceased to dwell on the things that it claims to study. In a certain sense, I think this is very true of the social sciences. It's not a condemnation of them at all. It's simply a way of stating that there's a distinctly human element to the nature of our experience, and in effect, that's not the domain of the sciences, but rather the humanities. And for me, part of what this was moving toward was the sense of personal reality that the media partake in. And so for me, specifically visual media, and more specifically, obviously, in this case, film, to me that is good sort of staging grounds for the analysis of how visual culture, music, and other sorts of things factor in very much narratively to our experience. And so sort of in a way can also be used to blur the lines between sort of a traditional distinction that you run into between literature and philosophy. You know, in the 70s it became quite the thing to challenge this distinction, and I think in a very real way film stands in an interesting position to do that as well, because it started off film as a way of documenting things, but moved very naturally, in a sense, into fiction and narrative and these things. So sort of in the modern way that this has gone, I think that it stands uniquely to help us think about ourselves. My ideas on film is interrogating, in a certain sense, the way that we encounter ourselves when we experience the world. That's a very complicated sort of thing to unpackage here, but I think if we look at the work of an individual such as Chris Marker, or there are a number of different people we can put out here with this, but we sort of see an interrogation of personal experience being done in this filmic medium in a way that is as well generalizable to people. So a way of sort of investigating what goes on with oneself in a communicative format. Recently, having rewatched Children of Men for like the fourth time probably, I can say that's a film that always strikes me and that always seems to work in certain ways with my ideas of how cinema ought to function, with this the way that it can sort of present us with a world. And so, in the case of that film, part of how that operates is showing us these characters that we get that we become emotionally involved with. But in a sense, in that film especially, we sort of get the feeling that the characters are an occasion for the world that they're placed in, and that it's this environment that really communicates with us in the film, that really draws us in. And so, working with this sort of sense of social milieu and this implicit notion of perception, that really draws me in. That's something that I'd like to explore myself.